The snow had started before dawn. By the time Daniel Hartman finished his shift at the rail yard, the world had turned white and unforgiving, the kind of cold that crept into bone and memory alike. His fingers were numb even inside threadbare gloves, and each breath came out in slow, ghostly clouds that hung for a moment, then vanished, like everything good seemed to lately. It was Christmas Eve. He hadn't marked the day on any calendar, hadn't spoken the words aloud, as if avoiding them somehow made the reality softer. But the world didn't care about his silence. Shop windows glowed in the distance, full of things he couldn't afford. Children's laughter echoed in the streets, their parents' arms heavy with packages, their faces flushed with happiness. Daniel kept his head down and walked. 16 hours. That was how long he'd worked today. 16 hours, and still, his pockets held nothing more than a few wrinkled bills and loose coins. Not enough for presents, not enough for meat, barely enough for bread. And at home, 3 small lives were waiting for him, trusting him with a faith he didn't feel he deserved. Ethan was 9 now, old enough to notice everything, old enough to understand when the lights were kept low to save oil, when the stew was watered down to stretch for another day, old enough to pretend not to notice. Clara was 7, softer, more hopeful, still clinging to belief in miracles and angels and Christmas magic. And Lily was barely 3. She didn't know what Christmas meant. She only knew when her belly hurt from hunger, and when the dark felt too long. 3 years had passed since Anna had gone into labor with her. 3 years since the world Daniel had known had fractured into before and after. Anna had always laughed easily, even when the cupboards were bare, even when the bills stacked up on the kitchen table. She'd find a way to smile, to tease him, to make him believe things could be better. "You'll see, Danny," she used to say, resting her hands over her swollen belly. "This baby's going to change everything." She had been right, just not in the way either of them had imagined. The midwife had done all she could. The doctor had come too late. And in the space of one shattering hour, Daniel had lost the woman who had been the warmth in his life. All that was left was Lily's first cry, sharp and desperate in a world already missing its light. Since then, he had simply endured. Work, feed the children, put them to bed, wake up, do it all again. No room for feeling, no space for dreaming, no time to grieve, only survival. Tonight, as he pushed through knee-high snow along the narrow path that led to their small cabin at the edge of town, he tried to prepare himself once more for the same disappointment. A dark house, cold floors, 3 little faces trying not to show how much they wished for more. "I'm sorry," he rehearsed in his mind, feet dragging heavily through the drifts. "There's no Christmas this year. I'm sorry." The words burned him with shame. But when he reached the fading outline of the cabin through the swirling white, something was wrong. Light glowed through the window, golden, warm, flickering softly as though the house itself had taken a breath. Daniel stopped, just stood there for a moment, snow settling on his shoulders, heart pounding as if he were a thief about to be caught. He had left that house cold and empty before dawn. There had been no lamp burning, no fire in the stove. Yet now, a soft glow spilled across the snow, painting the ground with something almost holy. And inside, he smelled food. Real food, not thin broth or stale bread. Meat, onion, spice. His mouth watered before his mind could rationalize what was happening. He moved forward slowly, boots crunching against the frozen earth, each step filled with dread and hope. The door wasn't locked. It creaked gently as he pushed it open. Warmth wrapped around him instantly, shocking his frozen skin. The air shimmered with heat. Fire crackled in the hearth. A lamp burned on the small wooden table, its light glowing against the rough walls that had long ago grown dim. The table was set. 4 chairs pulled out, bowls of steaming stew resting in the center. And by the stove, a woman stood with a wooden spoon in her hand. She turned when she heard the door. Daniel froze in the doorway, snow melting slowly off his coat onto the floor he had scrubbed so many late nights when exhaustion pushed him close to breaking. She was perhaps in her early 30s. Dark hair pulled back loosely, wisps framing a face marked by both beauty and fatigue. Her dress was simple, patched carefully at the seams. An apron he'd never seen before was tied around her waist. but there was nothing frightened in her eyes, only calm. "You're late," she said gently, as if she had been expecting him all along. "Supper's almost ready." His mouth opened, then closed. The world tilted under his feet. "Who are you?" The words came out rough, like he'd forgotten how to use them. She turned back toward the stove. "You should sit. You look half frozen." "My children?" His voice broke. "Where are my children?" He glanced upward, toward the narrow loft, and heard something that made his breath catch. Soft breathing, peaceful, untroubled, like they hadn't known hunger or cold for a single moment. "They're sleeping," the woman said quietly. "All three of them. Safe and warm." He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "You can't just walk into a stranger's home," he whispered. A small, almost sad smile touched her lips. "I didn't walk in uninvited." She reached into the pocket of her apron and removed a small folded square of paper. The edges were worn, creased and softened like it had been opened and closed again and again. She placed it gently on the table. Daniel recognized the handwriting instantly. Clara's careful, looping letters, the kind she practiced every night before sleep. He unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It read, "Angel needed, 87 Willow Bend Road. My daddy is too proud to ask for help. We need Christmas, please." Tears burned his eyes before he could stop them. She wrote this?" "Yesterday afternoon," the woman said. "She pinned it to the notice board outside the chapel." "Why?" "Because she's braver than you," the woman replied, not unkindly. Daniel pressed a hand to his face, a sound caught somewhere between shame and a broken sob. "And you believed her?" "I needed somewhere to go," she answered simply. "And she said angels always find the right door." Silence settled between them, thick and trembling with truth neither of them had prepared for. "Who are you?" he asked again, but now his voice was gentle. "Emily Rhodes," she said. "Widow, new to this town. I came here with nothing." She gestured faintly to her empty hands. "And somehow—" "So did you." Daniel looked around his cabin again. The mended curtain by the window, clean clothes hanging near the fire, a small pine branch placed in the corner, decorated with paper stars and thin strips of cloth. His home transformed. "Emily," he said slowly, "I don't have money. I don't have much of anything. I can't—" "I didn't come for payment," she interrupted. "I came because a little girl believed someone would help her father, and I wanted that little girl to be right." From the loft above, a small voice stirred. "Daddy?" Clara's sleepy whisper curled down the ladder. Daniel looked up. "It's okay," he called softly. "Go back to sleep." A pause. Then, in her half-dreaming certainty, she mumbled, "I told you angels were real." The words pierced him straight through. Emily turned back to the stove, lifting the pot from the heat. "Sit," she said again, softer now. "Eat while it's still warm." And for the first time in years, Daniel stepped out of the cold and into something that felt impossibly close to hope. The first thing Daniel noticed when he woke was the warmth. It was not the kind that only came from a fire. It was deeper than that, gentler, a living, breathing warmth that filled the small cabin and didn't seem to shrink away from the morning light. He lay there for a moment in the loft space he shared with Ethan, staring up at the rough wooden beams as if he were afraid the memory of last night would dissolve into ordinary darkness the moment he moved. The scent of coffee drifted up to him. Real coffee. His heart clenched. Slowly, carefully, he lifted his head and looked down through the opening toward the main room. Emily was already awake. She sat in the old rocking chair that had once been Anna's, Lily balanced on her lap as though she had always belonged there. Clara knelt beside them, carefully spooning small bites of soft oats toward her little sister's lips. Ethan sat at the table, unusually quiet, watching them with wide, uncertain eyes. "Morning," Emily said without looking up. "I hope you don't mind. The children were hungry." "I don't mind," he whispered, climbing down the ladder. "I don't mind at all." Lily let out a soft little laugh, her chubby hands grasping at a loose curl from Emily's hair. Daniel froze. Lily almost never laughed anymore. Not since Anna had died. Seeing that small, unexpected joy on her face hit him harder than any cry of hunger ever had. "She likes you," he murmured. Emily offered a gentle smile. "She's easy to love. And you fed them," he said, glancing at the table where bread, eggs, and a small pot of honey sat waiting. "I didn't even know we had eggs left." "We didn't," she replied honestly. "But the neighbor 2 doors down trades milk for mending." I fixed a rip in her boy's trousers. Daniel stared at her. "You did all that before sunrise?" She shrugged. "I'm used to making myself useful." Clara beamed. "She's really fast, Daddy, and really kind. She sings to Lily and she braided my hair like Mama used to." The word Mama fell softly into the air between them. Daniel's chest tightened. "I shouldn't have let a stranger into our home," he said, shame creeping into his voice. "This was reckless. This was dangerous." "Is it dangerous if it's helped your children?" Emily asked quietly. He didn't have an answer for that. They sat together at the small table, sharing breakfast like people who had known each other far longer than a single night. It felt confusing, comforting, like stepping into an old memory he had lived years ago when Anna had filled this space with her presence. Yet Emily was not Anna. She was stronger in some ways, quieter, guarded. Her eyes carried something heavy, something unspoken. "What happened to you?" Daniel finally asked when the children moved toward the corner to play with the small wooden shapes Emily had carved. She hesitated. "Why are your hands so skilled? Your movements so careful? You cook like someone who fed a family. You fix clothes like someone who depended on it. You look like someone who has run very far." Emily stared down at her hands. "I had a husband once," she said at last. "His name was Robert." Daniel stayed silent, letting her choose the pace. "He was kind, gentle, too good for the world he lived in." Her mouth twitched faintly. "He worked for his family business. They were powerful people. Controlled land, loans, men. And they didn't like you," Daniel guessed. "Not once he died," she whispered. His head turned sharply. "He's dead?" "6 months now. A riding accident, they said." Horse spooked. "Threw him badly." She swallowed hard. "But accidents are very convenient for men who benefit from them." Cold settled into Daniel's bones anew. What benefit could come from his death? "Everything he owned," she said. "Everything he was meant to pass to me." His fingers curled into a fist on the table. "They accused me of being unstable. Said grief had cracked my mind. Hired a physician to write papers, to have me put somewhere I couldn't dispute their claims." "An asylum?" he breathed. She nodded once. "So I ran, before they could cage me." Emily lifted her gaze slowly to his. "I ran with nothing, no money, no clothing beyond this dress. I followed roads and back paths and slept in barns and fields. And then I saw your daughter's note." Silence took the room. "So you're hiding," he said carefully. "I'm surviving," she corrected. "You can't stay here," he said on instinct. "Not if they're looking for you. They'll come here. They'll hurt you. And my children. I won't endanger them," she said quickly, rising from her chair. "I'll leave, Daniel. I should have already. I don't know why I let myself stay." But Lily clung to her. Clara stepped between them. "You can't leave," the little girl said firmly. "Angels don't come just to disappear again." Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Emily. "You said you had nowhere to go," he said quietly. "Stay until after Christmas. The roads will be covered in snow anyway. You won't make it far." Emily hesitated, caught between fear and a deep, aching need for rest. "And after Christmas," she whispered. "After Christmas," he said. "We'll figure out the rest together." Something in his voice made her believe him. That day passed in a strange peace Daniel hadn't known in years. Emily fixed the leak in the roof at noon with some spare tar he'd given up on months ago. She taught Clara how to thread a needle properly. She listened to Ethan's careful, thoughtful questions and replied as if his thoughts mattered. And Lily, the quiet, sickly little thing he had learned to worry over, followed Emily everywhere with soft, delighted sounds. But peace hinted never lasted long. Just before sunset, as Daniel stacked wood near the porch, a familiar shrill voice pierced the frozen air. "Well, I'll be." Mrs. Hensley stood at the edge of the yard, bundled in fur and judgment. "I thought I saw lights in that old cabin last night," she continued, eyes narrowing. "Didn't think you had a woman living here already, Daniel Hartman." "She's helping with the children," he replied evenly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Her gaze slithered toward the doorway. where Emily could be seen moving quietly inside. People in town will talk. Let them. Talk ruins reputations. And men like you don't have one to spare. Daniel met her eyes coldly. Then perhaps town gossip should try. Working 16 hours a day before speaking. About me again. Mrs. Hensley sniffed. Just be careful. Strange women bring strange trouble. She turned and left, her boots crunching into the snow. Daniel stepped inside, heart pounding. Emily stood by the window. She's not wrong, she said softly. People will come. Questions will be asked. Fingers will point. Let them point, he said. They won't take you. She turned to him. You don't even know me, she said sharply. You only know what I've done for your children. I know that your hands make warmth where there was none, he replied. I know that Lily laughs with you. I know you didn't have to come here, but you did. And that makes me dangerous, she replied, eyes glimmering. People destroy what they don't understand. Daniel took a step toward her. Then they'll have to get through me first. A stunned silence filled the room. Neither of them had meant to say what they truly felt so soon. Emily dropped her gaze first. You shouldn't say things like that, she murmured. Why? Because it would be easier if you didn't care. But I do, he said quietly. Somewhere between last night and this morning, I started to care more than I promised myself I ever would again. She lifted her head slowly. Daniel, I haven't said this to anyone since Anna died. I didn't think I ever could. But when I look at you, I feel like maybe life didn't end when she died. Maybe it just paused, and you walked into it again. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and trembling. I was running from men who wanted to own me, she whispered. I didn't expect to run straight into a man who would protect me. A knock thundered against the door. Sharp, heavy, not like a neighbor, not like a friend. Emily's face drained of color instantly. No, she barely breathed. They found me. Daniel's body went rigid. The children fell silent like the world had stopped breathing altogether. And slowly, he walked to the door and opened it. Two men stood there, well-dressed, eyes sharp with authority and entitlement. Mr. Hartman, the taller one said coldly, we're here to collect what belongs to us. Behind him, the shorter man smiled thinly. Our missing property. Emily's name was never spoken, but the threat hung heavy in the winter air. The air between them froze. I'm sorry, Daniel said slowly, his hand still on the door frame. You've made a mistake. There's nothing here that belongs to you. The taller man smirked. We don't make mistakes. Mr. Hartman, we make collections. His eyes drifted past Daniel's shoulder, seeking the familiar outline of Emily's figure in the warm glow of the lamplight. Emily Rhodes, widow of Robert Rhodes, property of the Rhodes estate. Emily stepped forward before Daniel could speak again. I belong to myself, she said, her voice shaking, but unbroken. You have no claim over me. The shorter man chuckled. You poor delusional woman. We have papers, doctor's evaluations, signature by sheriff's authority from Ashen County. You fled before process could be completed. Now you'll come quietly. Daniel stepped in front of her. She will not. One small word. But it carried thunder. And who exactly are you to decide that? The tall man replied. A rail worker living in a shack on the edge of town? I am the man standing between you and her, Daniel answered. And that's enough. From behind him he felt small hands clutch into his shirt. Daddy, Clara whispered, fear trembling in her tone. Emily walked past Daniel and lowered herself to Clara's height. It's okay, sweetheart, she said softly. No matter what happens, remember, you're safe. But Daniel couldn't accept that anymore. He stepped down off the porch, standing face to face with the men. Get off my land. The smile dropped from the tall man's face. You'll regret this. You don't understand the power you're standing against. He pulled a folded packet from inside his coat. These documents declare her unstable, legally unfit to choose. We are authorized to remove her. Daniel didn't even glance at the paper. She's more sane than any man who'd cage a grieving woman, he replied. Silence fell. Then a voice from the distance broke through. Is there trouble here? Sheriff Grant Morrison stood near the edge of the road, hands resting on his belt, eyes narrowed in quiet authority. The tall man turned. We represent the Rhodes estate. This woman is under our jurisdiction. and she is standing in my town, on private property. Not acting unstable at all, Morrison replied evenly. You're going to have to show me more than words, gentlemen. Emily exhaled as if life had been returned to her lungs. These men are lying, she said, stepping forward. They forged medical notes. They wanted control over land Robert left me. I ran to stay free. Morrison looked at Daniel. You vouch for her? With my life, Daniel said. Morrison studied Emily. Then the children behind her. Then at the men again. You'll leave, the sheriff said, and if you return without a lawful court order from this county, you'll be escorted to the border in chains. The men glared, humiliated, but powerless. This isn't over, the tall man hissed. She will be ours again. No, Daniel replied quietly. She won't. They turned and disappeared into the sheets of falling snow. Emily let out a broken sob and clutched Daniel's coat. They'll come again. They won't stop. They'll destroy your life because of me. Daniel pulled her into him without thinking. Let her feel his heart, racing but firm beneath his chest. Then they'll have to destroy me first, he whispered. And I'm not going down without a fight. Not when I finally have something worth protecting. For a moment the world faded away. There was only the hiss of the fire, the distant fall of snow, the small heartbeat of Lily tucked against Emily's side, and the quiet understanding blooming between two broken souls who hadn't known. They were seeking one another. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Daniel sat by the dying fire staring into the embers. Emily stood by the small wooden table, her fingers trailing over the edge as if grounding herself. I never wanted to be someone's burden, she said quietly. I wanted to disappear so I couldn't hurt anyone anymore. And yet, Daniel replied, eyes never leaving the flame, you walked into a home that was dying and breathed life into it again. I didn't mean to. I know, but you did. Silence stretched between them. Then suddenly raw truth spilled from his lips. I think I'm falling in love with you. Emily froze. I don't know when, Daniel admitted. Maybe when I saw Lily laugh for the first time in months. Maybe when Clara started smiling again. Maybe when you walked into this cold cabin and didn't ask anything in return. She turned slowly. You shouldn't, she whispered. I'm marked. I'm hunted. You have children. I already lost everything once, he said softly. After that, what is there left to fear except an empty life? Her breath trembled. I was married to a good man, she said, and I thought my heart had been buried with him. I swore I would never feel this way again, never allow myself to hope again. She stepped closer. But when I look at you, I see strength without cruelty, pain without bitterness, and love that never stopped, even after horror destroyed it. She placed her hand over his chest. I feel it here, and it scares me more than any rich, powerful man ever could. Then feel it with me, he said. Feel life again. We can be scared together. Her hand trembled in his, then slowly intertwined. Their faces drew closer, not in desperation, but in choice, in understanding, in quiet, undeniable belonging. Their lips met softly. Outside, the storm intensified, snow burying the world in silence. Inside, two hearts that had forgotten how to beat finally remembered. From the loft, Clara stirred, half awake. I knew it. She mumbled sleepily, angels stay when they fall in love. Daniel smiled against Emily's forehead. And for the first time in years, he slept without fear. The knock didn't come that morning. No boots crushed the snow outside. No voices carried threats through the frozen air. Only silence, and pale winter sunlight seeping through the small window panes. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar warmth against his chest. Emily was still there, pressed gently against him, her dark hair scattered across his shoulder, her breath soft and steady. For one fragile moment before the world returned, life felt normal, safe. He closed his eyes again, memorizing the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, the weight of her hand resting against his heart as if she were afraid he might disappear. I'm still here, she whispered, sensing his wakefulness. So am I, he replied softly. Outside, the world remained frozen, but inside, something had begun to thaw forever. Footsteps padded softly across the wooden floor, and then Clara's careful voice drifted up. Daddy, is she still here? Daniel smiled into the quiet. Yes, sweetheart. She's still here. A pause, then a whispered cheer. I told you. Angels stay. He opened his eyes to see the children peeking up through the loft ladder. Ethan, guarded but hopeful. Clara, wide-eyed and certain. Little Lily, clutching her blanket in one tiny fist. Emily sat up slowly, her cheeks flushed, eyes soft. Good morning, she said gently. Lily immediately reached up toward her. Emily gathered her into her arms like it was the most natural thing in the world. That morning, the world felt different, like something unseen but powerful had shifted the course of all their lives. Daniel finally stood at the stove, stirring the simple stew while Emily braided Clara's hair for church. Ethan watched carefully as Daniel sliced bread. You're not scared anymore, he said quietly. I am still scared, Daniel replied. But I'm not alone now. He glanced at Emily, who looked up at that moment and smiled in quiet understanding. That was enough. By midday, Sheriff Morrison arrived again. Alone this time, his expression thoughtful. They came to my office early this morning, he said. Demanded action, threatened lawsuits, claimed you were harboring an unfit woman. Emily froze slightly. And? Daniel asked. And I told them something simple. Morrison smiled faintly. I told them Pine Hollow doesn't cage innocent women, and that if they wanted her, they'd have to prove she was anything less than what she's shown herself to be here. Kind, capable, sane, and human. A breath Emily didn't realize she'd been holding escaped her. They won't stop completely, Morrison added, but they won't touch her either. Word's spreading. Town's on her side now. On your side. Clara beamed. See? I told everyone she was an angel. Morrison chuckled. Seems you brought hope back into this little town, miss. No, Emily said gently. You all just reminded me I deserved it. That evening, as the sun dipped down and painted the snow pale gold, Daniel stood beside Emily outside the cabin. The cold no longer felt cruel. It felt clean. Hopeful. Do you regret coming here? He asked. She looked around, the children laughing, the chimney curling smoke into the sky, the tiny, imperfect home that had somehow become everything. No, she answered honestly. For the first time since Robert died, I don't feel like I'm running anymore. Then stay, he said. Not just for Christmas, not just for the winter. She turned slowly. Stay, how? Daniel reached into the pocket of his worn coat and pulled out a simple ring, Anna's old band that he had kept hidden away, afraid to ever use it again. But now, it felt like it had been waiting for this moment. For forever, Emily. His hand trembled slightly. I'm a poor man with 3 children. I can't give you riches. I can't promise an easy life. But I can promise you this. You will never be alone again. You will be loved every single day of your life if you choose to be mine. Tears rolled down her face as she stared at the ring. And the past? She whispered. And the people who want to own me? They lost their power the moment you chose yourself. He dropped to one knee in the snow. Emily Rhodes, will you marry me? Will you become Emily Hartman and choose this broken, beautiful, impossible family with me? For a long, trembling moment, the world held its breath. Then she nodded, sobbing through a radiant smile. Yes, Daniel, I choose you. I choose the children. I choose this life. Suddenly, tiny arms flew around their waists. Yes, 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 Clara cried. I knew this would happen. Ethan laughed. Lily gurgled in happy chaos. The air practically glowed with joy. They married in the small chapel 3 weeks later. No grand crowd, no fancy decorations, just love. The pastor spoke softly of second chances, of unexpected miracles, of broken hearts healing. And when Daniel kissed Emily for the first time as his wife, the tiny church filled with warm light. Through the stained glass like heaven. Itself had leaned close to witness it. Spring came early that year. The snow melted into soft earth. Emily planted a small garden where there had once only been frozen ground. Daniel repaired the fence. Ethan helped with the tools. Clara planted flowers everywhere, claiming, angels like color. Lily took her first unsteady steps in the sunlight, arms reaching not for fear, but for laughter. One evening, as Daniel sat on the porch watching his family move around the yard, Emily joined him, settling her head gently on his shoulder. Do you think fate is real? She asked. I think, he answered, glancing at the children. Sometimes angels are just people brave enough to answer a little girl's prayer. Clara ran up with a paper in her hands. Daddy, I wrote another letter. He smiled. To who this time? Not asking for anything, she said proudly. Just saying thank you. He opened it gently. Dear God, thank you for Emily. Thank you for love. Thank you for not forgetting us. Love always. Clara Hartman. Daniel wiped his eyes, heart overflowing. The man who had once walked home in darkness now sat surrounded by light. The woman who had once run from the world now stood rooted in love. 3 children who once went to sleep hungry now slept full and safe. And in a tiny cabin at the edge of town, in a world that had once tried to break them, a family lived, a real one, not born by blood, but built by courage, faith, and the belief that sometimes angels arrive in the middle of a snowstorm and stay forever